We're now going to look at the grid drafting setting in AutoCAD 2010. Now what you'll notice, we have a drawing very similar to the drawing we used for the snap drafting setting earlier. But what I've got here now is a box that is 200 long by 100 wide, and it's actually made up from 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, I have cheated slightly here. The drawing is available to you as part of this particular course, but the bottom left corner is sitting there at 100, 100 with regard to coordinates. So all these coordinates again are nice and neat and tidy. There's no like 99.78 by 57.46 or anything kind of out there like that. So what we've got is a regularly shaped object, and what we want to do is we want to work with that object with our grid this time. Now the good thing is you can combine your snap setting and your grid setting very, very effectively. What we're going to do first though, we're going to switch off our object snaps down here like we did in the previous one. So object snap there, we click to switch off. Now we're going to right click over grid and go to settings like we did with snap. It actually brings up exactly the same tab, the Snap and Grid tab, in the Drafting Settings dialog box. I'm going to switch on Snap, and I'm going to switch on Grid. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to work with the Grid and the Snap and utilize them effectively. So at the moment you'll notice that the Snap spacings are 10 and 10, so there's 10 there, 10 there. Grid spacings are also 10 and 10. Now, make sure that your grid snap is set to rectangular snap, not isometric or polar, but grid snap, rectangular snap, like so. Ignore the grid behavior settings. Things like following dynamic UCS are what you would use in a 3D modeling environment. We're not in a 3D modeling environment at the moment, and what we can also do here, this is quite useful. We'll look at limits later on in the course, but you can display your grid beyond what they call the drawing limits. But we'll cover that later. Now, I've set my grid and my snap to 10. So if I now click on OK, watch what happens on the screen. Lots of dots. Now, those dots are your grid. And as you can see, if you've got regular objects that need to be drawn, what you can do now is you can actually work with those. And look, if I zoom in real tight here, look, you can see that they look like they're slightly off. They're not, but what they're doing there is it's allowing you to work to a grid. So I'm going to work to a grid now instead of using object snaps. I can draw my line, and you'll notice that every grid point is also a snap point because they're both set to 10. So I can draw my inner line like so, and I'm just using points. Look, you can see that I'm just clicking on each point as I go like that, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to right click, use the shortcut menu and select close, and it goes back to the first point of my line. Now that's great, but what happens now if I need to work to points within the squares on the grid? I've got, in essence, each square on the grid has 4 points, doesn't it, like a square. So I right click now over my snap or my grid, it doesn't matter which, and go to settings. I'm going to change my snap spacings here to 5, and I can just tab and it'll automatically tab the Y spacing for me. So I put 5 in the X spacing, press tab, and the Y updates automatically. I now click on OK. So what happens now is I can work between my grid points. I'm actually going to zoom in on this top left corner of my rectangle. So I'm just going to roll upwards on the wheel on the mouse if you've got it, or you can use your zoom and your pan here on the status bar. Zoom and pan are there. Okay. Now let's work with that 5 setting on the snap setting with our grid. I can now work within my grid squares. Look, can you see that? I'm snapping to each 5 point. Obviously the grid points, the dots, are going to be 5s as well. They're multiples of 5. But this is really clever now. I can go to my line command and watch. I can work within my grid squares and draw a little square there that is 10 by 10, but it's offset by 5 from the original rectangle on the outside there. So let me repeat that one more time. I go to the line command, and I use my snap points within the grid points. And as you can see, snap and grid are then extremely effective because I've got an offset of 5 around my little square there. So as you can see, very effective, very neat and tidy. And then once you're finished doing your drawing, all you do is you go to snap, click on it, switch it off, grid, click on it, switch it off. And now your crosshair moves freely again. So you can see there's snap and grid for regular shapes, regular objects with regular offsets. You can set your snap and your grid to work very effectively and very productively for you.